Welcome back, everybody. Dealing with Concept 2, we're going to discuss the political and economic contributions of George Washington. George Washington was inaugurated in New York April 30th, 1789. Many people feared that the new government would not work, and Washington was one of them. As discussed, the United States was a nation in name only, as people still thought of themselves as citizens of their state first and foremost, and then maybe perhaps the nation. Washington's two administrations are significant because of the precedent set in both domestic and foreign affairs. George Washington's contribution to America is most often described in one word: character. Balanced rather than brilliant, he commanded his followers by strength of character and style of personal leadership. A French diplomat who witnessed Washington's first inauguration in New York City reported in awe, he has the soul, look, and figure of a hero united in him. Almost everything Washington did was calculated to give the impression of almost regal stateliness in order to demonstrate his lack of ambition and political partisanship. For example, he rode a white horse with a striking saddlecloth made of a leopard skin. He also had an elegant coach bearing his crest and drawn by a matched team of 6 cream-colored horses. His house in New York was one of the grandest in the city, fully staffed with slaves and servants. It was the Founding Fathers' idea to find a man in America who could represent the virtues of the people and who had the character and leadership style to formalize the new political institutions. This style and character of leadership was definitely found in George Washington. At least he's able to put on that image. Who had the prestige that he had more prestige than any person in America, and he was hoped that his reputation and character would draw the different political factions together, anti-federalists and federalists, rather than dividing them up. Right? So he very much feared, as many people feared, factions or political parties. Washington could have had anything he wanted at the end of the American War of Independence, including a crown. Alexander Hamilton suggested that he should be king, which Washington disagreed with. He bore great responsibility, too. The political stability of the new nation depended in large measure on how he handled himself in office. The ideal of self-governing republic on which this nation was founded has survived and flourished for more than 2 centuries, in some degree based on the first president's relationship to the power vested to him. For example, Washington might as well have had continued office until death, and thus set a pattern for self-perpetuation for his successors in presidency. If he was a bad president, for example, the first president being a bad president, it's conceivable that the future administration changeovers might have come in palace revolutions type that were very familiar with other nations. As a result, Washington's behavior established a tradition of a 2-term president, which later became a constitutional amendment, but not until after World War II, after FDR was elected 4 terms to the presidency. Were Washington alive today, if he was alive today, he might have a difficult time maintaining the respect history has given him. In this country, we're definitely image-oriented, and public officials have a certain formula that they have to follow. So it's reasonable then to wonder if people can enter public life and make a difference as they did in the first years of the country as far as sound policy is concerned. Even as our expectations have grown, our respect for this and sympathy with presidents have diminished, right? So we're a people that have become very cynical of our leaders, and for justifiable reasons. But nonetheless, there is a price to pay for cynicism. there's very little sacred in society today, right? Um, what was it? Friedrich Nietzsche said that the sacred are those things that one is not able to laugh at. And so we definitely don't have that anymore within our society. Pretty much everything is up for grabs to laugh at, including our leaders, who would charge them with tremendous amounts of responsibility. And again, some of that is in good measure, but the consequences are the same. By modern measures, Washington did not read the right books. He relished in how-to manuals with their ideas of use of manure and animal husbandry. He did not delve far into the arts, sciences, and philosophy. When John F. Kennedy was coaxed in supplying at least 10 favorite books, the collection was heavy with history, biography, and geopolitics. The kind of reading that he knew critical journalists would admire. 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago, what am I talking about? What would it be now? 40, 50 years ago, when he took office, we took the president at their word. The suspicion now is that the list was probably fraudulent, right? Washington was not an accomplished public speaker, nor did he speak any foreign languages. His military achievements were judged for their practicality rather than their brilliance. The Battle of Trenton brought the American war effort back to life, but the battle was technically a shambles. 3 columns were to have crossed the Delaware. Only Washington, with the main body of 2,400 men, made it across. The powder of his troops was soaked by freezing rain, so some of them could not fire their arms and had to depend on bayonets. Washington's officers pleaded with him to call off the attack, so the Battle of Trenton was won by the determination of one man, but certainly not by his military expertise. Would Washington have done the same thing on the miserable night if the failing campaign would have been on the 6 o'clock news with close-up shots of ragged men? It would have been perceived as a complete debacle. How does the news media impact success of president's programs? This is something to think about when this country engages in war, as it does quite often. What will the effect of the war be within the media? And again, that's for individuals to decide. Is this a good thing that the media has such a strong influence within foreign policy, or is it necessarily a detracting aspect? And probably every case is different. Washington would have been suspected of conflict of interest at every turn, since he accumulated nearly 1,000 acres of land in his last years and was judged as one of the wealthiest men in the nation. Washington's favorite recreation was fox hunting. Consider the environmentalist reaction if he had chased a scraggly fox over the hills on horseback right today. By most historical accounts, Washington was rather colorless, unapproachable, lacking in humor, and had no real close friends. It must be granted that such a man wouldn't get very far in political office today, with a media-savvy culture that demands so much. I mean, if you watch the Al Smith Catholic charitable dinner, black tie or white tie tuxedo tails events, $2,500 a plate. I mean, basically they set up the candidates. If you watched it, it's pretty good. Look it up if you didn't see it. They're entertaining. Both candidates were there. Mitt Romney and Barack Obama were there. They have professional comedians write jokes for them, and they get in front of the dinner crowd and they deliver these jokes. Lots of fun, but I couldn't imagine George Washington being subjected to such a humorous event, even for something that's a charity event. So the expectation that Washington would be the country's first president prompted some Americans to support ratification of the Constitution when back in the day. Thus, it was the image of Washington's character and personal style of leadership that attracted many Americans to him, and thus to supporting the new national government. So it's kind of interesting. It's just the concept of image is radically different from back then than it is today, right? So people are still looking back then towards the image of the man rather than his policies and maybe what he did specifically, if whether it was a failure or not. But definitely that type of image that George Washington had cultivated back then would not go over too well. He would be seen as an elitist, as somebody who didn't connect well with people, somebody who wasn't able to pull off a joke, and somebody that wasn't too savvy about what probably electronic and internet media would have to say about him. Although Washington sometimes looked on his 22 years of public service as a kind of prison sentence that took him away from his land, he brought to the presidency a deep sense of responsibility towards the nation, integrity, and a kind of humility of personal power, not just position power. And really, truly amazing that he did not continue his presidency beyond 2 terms. So that'll conclude the George Washington lecture. This will just be a brief lecture on George Washington. Not too much about it, George Washington, but it is important to understand the oops, there we go. The degree of integrity he brings to the office that holds, even to this day somewhat, that this is a position of prestige, and we should respect it, although a lot of that has diminished in recent years, for better or worse. Again, maybe there are justifiable reasons that we are cynical about power. And so that's an individual choice. But again, the consequences for cynicism are all the same, whether it's justified or not. People don't take things seriously. People don't engage in political discourse with anything beyond, if they do engage in political discourse, it's usually name-calling and trying to score points. All right, I'll talk with you guys later. The next person we're going to take a look at is John Marshall.